So it upsets me that our newspapers don't acknowledge more of that, and more importantly here specifically in Southern California and in the United States, that's not the newspaper's tradition. When we had the great immigrant waves of the late 19th century, the early 20th century, you had a lot of newspapers courting those immigrants. Of course, it came in a different way in the comic strips. We remember the Katzenjammer Kids, one of the first comic strips. It was the going-ons of two rambunctious German youth with German parents, and the German parents, they spoke in very thick, when it was written out, it was very German-inflected English, but nevertheless, they would mix in some of those words. In fact, because of that previously accepting ethos that American publishers had, that's where we get so many of the loan words that makes American English so wonderful. That's why you have somebody like myself who has no connection to Jewish culture at all, nevertheless knowing a lot of Yiddish words that have become part of American English. Schmaltz, schlemiel, and schmuck, and the like. Those first came out in the American newspaper press. Here in Southern California, one of the first English language newspapers, it was actually a bilingual newspaper. The Los Angeles Star had a Spanish language component called La Estrella de Los Angeles. People did not have a problem with acknowledging the minority communities that we had here. That is a problem, though, that we face today, and that's something that I, at least in my own profession, try to mess with as much as possible. And the final point I'll leave to all of you, and something that excites me as a reporter, a lot of people get upset by a mainstream media that does not cover these ethnic communities, that does not want to acknowledge our linguistic diversity. In the past, all we can do is write letters to the editor, but what's happening now is these ethnic communities are creating their own newspapers, their own news media. And as a result, because the American mainstream media does not want to acknowledge the diversity among us, it's dying. And that's a good thing. Thank you. At this point, any questions, please? I try not to talk too long because I love questions. And don't be shy. Question right there.
Thank you, first of all. And I think, really appreciate all of the humor with the code mixing and language mixing.
I try.
Yeah. So, as a reporter in media, I have a question for you about the topics that we've all been discussing today and kind of appreciating the humor of it, but also kind of pushing it into a more public space. Do you have any ideas or, I guess, forums or spaces where you think we could maybe continue talking about these things more publicly?
Newspapers do try to hold town hall meetings every once in a while. It's more like what they'll do is they'll open their tower, their own version of the ivory tower, and they tell the public, come address us, come meet us, and we'll talk about whatever issues at hand. That's where I would argue anybody who has these problems, and I'm talking here specifically about how newspapers publish what they do. If you have a problem with how they address particular issues, that's where I would suggest you go and talk to them. And you should also pressure those newspapers to be more connected to the community at large, to have these town hall discussions. That's something that used to happen with more regular occurrence, but because the media has a problem that we do today where it's slowly dying, they've really forgotten that. They've really forgotten their sense of civic duty to try to engage with different communities at hand. The Los Angeles Times, of course, is one of the worst examples. I still think it's a great newspaper. It used to be a much better newspaper because it was more engaged with the communities that we have here in Southern California. And even then, though, I would say it was doing a horrible job. It's just it's a newspaper that simply just doesn't get it. And then specifically with the topics that all of you are speaking today, and to address the bigger topic of, with Arizona and what's going on, unfortunately we have a media that is scared to confront those topics because of the readership now of the media that happens. Again, I have friends who cover immigration, who covers education especially, and the minute you even talk about education in California, here come the trolls. Illegal aliens, Reconquista, destroying, Mexicans don't care anything about education, Spanish is infiltrating our school. It gets to a reporter, and those reporters especially, they cannot say anything about it. They cannot go and say, screw you. I have the luxury of saying, a la chingada with you. And I do that all the time in my column, by the way. But mainstream media, We can't do it. And as a result, those reporters, they get scared and they don't want to cover those significant issues that all of you are engaged in on a very personal and professional level, which saddens me. But then that's why I would argue, I'm glad this conference happened. I'm glad it's open to the public. I would suggest that you do it again. I would suggest that you get it out of UCLA and get it into places where community members can actually access, instead of coming here to UCLA, either a bus ride or pay $10 to get a parking pass. It's important. Create your own media. All of you are doing amazing things. All of you are investigating or researching fascinating subjects that are crucial to the future of the present of this country. But most of the times it gets lost, and the media is too lazy to do anything about it unless you come forth to them and give them a story idea. So create your own media. I'm glad you guys have a blog. All of you should have blogs, and all of you should blog about what you do. And I'm being completely serious about this. That's the only way we can truly get our perspective and what we do out there, because we can't rely on anyone else anymore. Other questions? Questions?
I'll make a comment. I don't think it's good that the mainstream media is not.
I was being sarcastic, obviously.
I think it's actually very sad. One of my greatest pleasures every day is reading the LA Times, with its current limitations. I mean, the front page is now, 15 pages instead of 30. I mean, it's sad to see the decline. But of course, I agree with you that other viewpoints need to be represented. So the town hall meeting is one idea. The focus on web-based versions is another. But I guess I'd like to ask you, not tongue-in-cheek, to give other suggestions for ways that you think, like hiring reporters' criteria for editors, how they come up with assignments. I read Jeffrey Fleischman, who's the editor, the reporter in Cairo, every time he's in the paper, because I love his articles, because I happen to have an interest in the Middle East. So, we all have our fans. I love Steve Lopez for his columns, and on and on. But those are like little gems in an otherwise, rather dull presentation.
Yeah, thank you for your comment. Obviously, I was being sarcastic and saying I'm glad the mainstream media is dying. But at the same time, though, they dug their own grave. In that sense, I have no sympathy for them whatsoever. They dug their own grave. They decided not to address and acknowledge the diverse communities we have here and the changing technology that we did. My particular genre of mainstream media, the alt weekly press, we're also hurting as well. We've done a little bit better than that, though, because we quickly acknowledge we have to cover the communities at hand. That said, again, I'm the only minority reporter in a county that's now a majority minority county. That really is shameful.